Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again today. We have another amazing show lined up for y'all. We're going to talk to a special guest today. She is an organized psychologist and master coach. Her name is Dr. Shahrzad Nooravi. And first and foremost, I want to be excited to introduce her to the show because she also has a book that we're going to be talking about today. A Powerful Culture Starts With You, Cultivating a Thriving Workplace from the Inside Out. First and foremost, Dr. Shahrzad, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Shemaya.
So with you and your business skills and your coaching, tell the audience first and foremost a little bit about yourself, a little background.
Sure. So I've always been fascinated by human behavior. And through the different jobs I had over the years in working in-house for companies around coaching and training and talent management, I realized there's a psychology to business. And there are ways to create an environment where people are engaged, where people are proud of the culture, where they know what the vision is and what direction the organization is going in. And the more I learned, the more I realized this is what I want to do as my profession. And after some years of working for different companies and doing some consulting work, I went back to school to earn my doctorate in organization development because I wanted to work across all of the functions of an organization and all of the systems. And shortly thereafter, I launched my company, which is named Strategy Meets Performance. And I've had my practice for 12 years, and I work with leaders who really believe in creating a strong culture. They know the importance of it. They realize it keeps people at your company. It's good for your brand. It reduces turnover, which is especially important in these days. And most recently, earlier this year, after all of these years of working with really bright, talented leaders who would ask me, what do I do around my culture? Tell me what to do. I wrote and launched my first book, which is entitled A Powerful Culture Starts With You.
And when you are making these elements available for people to learn from and to grow from, what is the root when it comes to tapping into the potential of an individual? How can we find that starting point where we can start growing?
What a great question. Thank you for that. The root is openness. The root is curiosity about how a person shows up as a leader. It's openness to finding out, what does the person do really well and where do they shine? And also openness to learning what things could be a little bit better, what adjustments could be made to fully tap into the person's potential and power.
And a lot of us, we are human beings. We have our good days and then we have our not so good days. When it comes to stress, based on your experience, have you been able to get over stress and still be centered as demands are needed for you to be able to perform day in, day out?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We get stressed out and we feel anxious, and how we feel shows up anywhere we go, and it impacts those around us. And in fact, emotions are like sponges. So even if you're in a same space with a colleague or even family member who's in a bad mood, who's not even saying anything, we kind of pick up the bad mood, right? So the importance of managing our stress is that it impacts those around us and their moods as well. And so I work with my clients on both short-term and long-term strategies. So long-term strategies are ensuring that you are managing your work hours, because how will you feel fresh when you're working till the end of the day, you take a short break to eat, and then you're working till midnight? How do you truly get to decompress and relax when you have a regular schedule like that? Not on occasion, but regularly. A lot of people work until very late. So part of it is managing how you work and what things that you are doing that perhaps you don't need to be doing. There are things that we should delegate that will help others grow, and it will take things off of our plate. I also talk about the esteem portfolio in my talks and in my book. And this is, how do we come up with things that bring us esteem aside from work? It's wonderful if your work brings you esteem and you feel so good about it. It's fantastic. And how else can we get esteem? Whether it's spending time with our family, whether it's reading, whether it's engaging in a hobby that we love or sports that we love. And we often tell ourselves, I don't have time. And here's the thing. One of the things I've observed in myself and in clients is when you sign up for a class or something you have to go to, you're more likely to wrap things up and go there. So managing your time, finding things that give you esteem, of course, proper sleep hygiene and eating. So those are some of the long-term ones. And then for some of the short-term things, I talk to a lot of my clients about mindfulness. And that's the practice of being present. Because when we're really stressed out, we are in one of two places, and they are not the present right here, right now. We're often stuck in the past, wondering, oh my God, how did I get here? Why did I make that mistake? Why did they make that mistake? And it's this rumination, these thoughts over and over again, and you're trying to find some new solution, but you're not in the present. Or we're so worried about the future and anxious about it that, again, we're not in the present. And so those two things, being in the past and the future, take us away from the present moment. And when we are able to be mindful and practice things that help us be in the present moment, we're able to bring down that stress and change the environment around us. And when I work with clients on mindfulness, whether one-on-one or in groups, we talk about simple things that people could do. So, of course, one thing is meditation and just creating a space and stillness to just breathe. And when the thoughts come, to just let them pass. They're going to come. So meditation is one way, but there are other ways. Some people feel more centered after they exercise, whether it's at the gym or outside, power walking. Some people feel really good after journaling. Some people feel good playing music and making your environment really nice. I often have very early mornings and I'll have my candles, I'll have my soft music, I'll have my second cup of coffee, and it's all to be really present. So there's a lot of little things we could do. One thing I love is photography and nature photography. And I'll tell you, if you go up and you're in a garden or outside or in a park and you look at plants and flowers and nature up close, there's no way you can't just start relaxing. It's so life affirming. And I often do it with a camera and I capture it. And so a lot of little things we could do that's right for each person. It could be different from one person to the next that help us both in the short term and the long term for reducing stress and just being present and more joyful.
Once again, listen to I Am Refocused Radio, talking to our guest, Dr. Shahrzad Nooravi, and about her book that we will get into a little bit later, A Powerful Culture Starts With You, Cultivate a Thriving Workplace from the Inside Out. Now, you talked about mindfulness and being present moment, and you talk about diversity too. That's very crucial, especially in today's world. Employees and employers being in a diverse setting. What's some of the strategies that you connect the dots with your clients when it comes to exploring the multicultural aspect of work settings?
Great question. Thank you so much. So one of the ways that we can appreciate and practice diversity and inclusion is in our meetings. And one of the things that I share with clients that's really important to do upfront is before you even have a meeting, you send out an agenda well in advance. Why? So people could come in prepared and ready to speak. Oftentimes, meetings don't have agendas or they're really vague. And by doing that, half the room, which tend to be extroverted types and half tend to be introverted types, half the room will not give you their best participation because introverts like to think, process, and speak. And me being one myself, I know before I go into a meeting, I always do my homework. I read up, I think, I research. And so one way to get people who might be introverted or shy or don't always love speaking up in meetings is to let them prepare. The second thing is to have a set of guidelines for the communication in that room. And that includes saying every voice is important. We encourage you all to speak up. And in fact, when we ask for ideas, we're going to go around and ask each person, because when you don't do that, the people who tend to speak up are those with power and those who have an extroverted personality. And so that's something really important to share, that I want to hear everyone's voice today. And that's why I sent the agenda in advance so you could all be prepared. There's so much collective wisdom in this room that I want us all to tap into. And we want to be inclusive. And so when others share ideas, and brainstorming sometimes is messy or silly, and that's a part of it, I want everyone to be supportive. I'm not going to allow, we tried that before, because that's something that kills collaboration. And especially when new people are coming in with a fresh set of eyes, that's not helpful. So I make sure to set guidelines within the meeting. And other things you could do is, depending on what's happening that month or that week, if there's a celebration for a certain culture or religion, to let people in the room who ascribe to that culture or just appreciate it to talk about it, because it's so important to learn more about other cultures and other religions and what they all do to practice. And so I think that's also important as well. And when you start doing these things, even people who normally would be more reserved will test out speaking out, or test out about sharing something authentic about themselves. And the more you welcome it, the more of an authentic workplace you will create, where people feel like they belong. Belonging is so important. And you could have a room that's really diverse with people that are really different and create that environment. And even if you have a room where a lot of the folks are homogenous, the same age, same gender, same background, but if you have even one person who is different, to welcome that person's perspective. And oftentimes the whoever is the majority of the group takes that space. But to say early on, well, I noticed we have 2 females here and 20 males. I want to make sure, as we have our discussions, that we hear from everyone, and making it very clear what that means. So these are just a few ways to do the setup and ways to create that inclusion and belonging in any group.
Once again, talking to our special guest today, Dr. Shahrzad. When we are dealing with problems and trying to solve them, you have a thing called a drive-it model. Mm-hmm. Can you explain that for our audience and how that can be useful in the professional world?
I would love to. Thank you so much. I am pulling up a visual so that those who watch this on YouTube can see it as well, but I will talk through the steps. So this is a coaching model that I created because we all need to coach in our lives, whether it's with our colleagues, with our reports, with our family members, in our community, if we're doing community work. And most people are not going to get several hundred hours of training and client coaching hours, yet we all need to coach. So I thought to myself, how do I create a model that's memorable and easy to use that anyone could start coaching? And the Drive It model, it's an acronym, and each step is describing a part of the model. And for each one of these steps, I have 4 to 6 questions that can be asked. And this could be downloaded on apowerfulculture.com. And that way it's 2 pages, and you could have that and review it. And so the Drive It model, the first step is D, determine the challenge. And so this is when you are talking to someone and they want to work through or process through something that they're dealing with. And you ask them, can I coach you through that? Is this a good time, or should we set another time? And you let them know, I'm just going to ask you questions. I assume you have the answers in you, and I just want to create that space to let you process. So you get permission, and determine the challenge is the first step. And sometimes we know exactly what our problem is, and we'll say what it is. And sometimes we don't quite know. We know something is bugging us. And when you create that space to determine what it is exactly, there's a thing of beauty about it, because when we could name it, we could claim it, right? And so a person may say, I just feel like I've talked to my supervisor a few times and I'm not getting the response I want from her. She always cancels the calls, and the person, you just let them speak. You just create silence and you ask a question. How does that impact you? How would you like things to be? So it's just letting them identify what it is. So that's determine the challenge. The R, reflect on what making this change would mean to you, is really letting the person share what it is that they would like to see different. And so in the case of the supervisor, you could ask, if things were great, what would it look like? And the person would say something like, well, when I emailed, I would hear back. And when we had meetings, the person would keep the meeting. And in these meetings, the person would show me support or help me brainstorm. So then we get to the understanding of where there is. We're here, we want to get there. That's the preferred future. So that's the R, reflect on what making this change would mean to you. I is invite a new way of thinking. Sometimes we just operate with assumptions. We assume, and oftentimes it's the ego and the fight or flight brain, where we assume the worst of people, of negative intent. And the person could say, well, that supervisor just doesn't care. And that may not be the truth, and invite a new way of thinking would be asking the person, what else might be going on? I'm with you. I want you to have a great experience, but what else might be going on? And oftentimes the person will say, well, I know this person travels a lot. I know this person has several children and it's hard to manage it all. So even understanding a little bit about the other person's world could change the way that we approach them. Because oftentimes we think they don't care or they're not doing a good job. But how do we find a new way of thinking? The V is valiantly get out of your comfort zone. So if your comfort zone is to not speak up, and we've been taught this by the way we're raised based on our gender, our culture, our family environment. A lot of us are told, don't rock the boat, don't make a big stink out of it, just keep quiet, and that's how the messages we were given when we were young and young adults, and even into the different jobs we've had. They're kind of in our nervous system. And it's only when we decide we want to show up in a different way that we are then getting out of what we know and what's comfortable and what's a comfort zone. So the valiantly getting out of your comfort zone for that person might be bringing this up to the supervisor and saying, I really want to have more time with you. And I've noticed I don't get a response from you. Our meetings get canceled. And when we do have meetings, I don't think we have enough time for me to really talk to you. So that could be really huge for someone who's never done that before, who's always told to be quiet or, avoid conflict. And the E is engage support. There's a lot of support around us that we don't always realize. And it could be seeking input from a mentor, talking to someone else in that organization about the culture, about what's going on. And so the E for engaged support is really important, something that tough independent leaders don't always do. And there's a lot of wisdom out there we could tap into. And then the I is initiate the first step. Oftentimes, one tiny first step, whether it's looking up an article, whether it's making a phone call, whether it's initiating one conversation, could be the momentum you need to propel you forward. So I always ask in all of my coaching conversations, I'll ask, what's one tiny step you can take toward that? And then the last one, the T, is transform your thinking to prepare for challenges. And I share this because anything new that we do, whether it's taking on a new project, whether it's getting promoted, whether it's starting a new company, is going to be filled with challenges. Why? Because we haven't done it before. And I think the more we could own that some of these big new things we're doing are going to be tough, and just tell ourselves, well, I'm going to be ready for it. And when it comes to sharing your voice, guess what? Some people will be thrilled. Some people will say, good for you. And there may be some who may not like it. There may be some people who maybe aren't ready to have boundaries or have honest feedback from you. And that's okay too. So I always share, be prepared when you share your voice, when you share your agency, when you decide to do something new. People will react, mostly in good ways, but there will be some people who don't like it. I could tell you of a recent example. I have a client and she's in a networking group, and she observed that there was a joke made that was inappropriate and sexual in nature, and she didn't like it. And I'm sure there's others in the room that didn't like it, but it's one of those things where you have to decide, are you going to speak up and shift the dynamic? And you might not be liked by everyone, at least not for that moment. And so it's knowing that when you make change, sometimes in the beginning, people may not embrace it right away. And that's okay. That's okay, even though we all like to be liked. So that's the drive it model. And again, there's questions that I've created for under each of the steps to really create an easy flow in these conversations.
And with that drive it model, I mean, it's also make me think of not just preparing at the end, because the T is transferring your thinking to prepare for challenges, but it's also prepared to drive again. Like this is something you have to keep doing over and over again so that you don't remain stuck in a new chapter. Because, it's like swinging a bat. You won't always get a home run, but you might hit the ball. But you just keep swinging until you get the next one.
That's exactly right. And I love that. And I tell clients, look, when you're doing something to create a new habit or a new way of showing up, because your brain has created these grooves that when something happens, you have the same response. There's deep grooves. And what you're doing, and this is in neuroplasticity of how we rewire our brain, you're creating new grooves. And guess what? You're not going to start doing it right away. Like you just said, that you're going to fall back. You may do it once and then get scared and not do it. And that's okay. And to remember, hey, I'm creating a new habit. I'm just going to keep trying. I'm going to keep trying. So you're exactly right. You got to keep driving it.
Once again, I Am Refocused Radio, talking to our guest today, Shahrzad. Hope I'm saying the last one right. Nooravi.
Nooravi, that's right.
So when people are going to your resources, and you mentioned a little bit of story of one of your clients, when someone is finally clicking as far as what they are strategizing to do and using your techniques to get them there, what is the feeling like with your clients when they finally start to see things actually clicking? Oh, okay, that's how you're supposed to do it.
Oh, I love this question. When we see the fruits of our labors, it looks like people telling the client, you've changed. You just seem so much more open. Or I really like how you're always asking us questions now. I really like that you are having the group get together more. The client himself or herself will say, that person that really annoyed me, he's real cool now. And it's really because of that internal change. It's when we change ourselves, those around us shift. When we decide we're going to be open and have our voice shared, other people will notice, and that you will be a role model, and you'll inspire them, and you'll see your behavior mirrored in theirs. And my clients have told me that they see work and human relations and employee relations in a different way, that they feel more joy, they feel more expressed, they feel less fearful, and they take more risks than they did before. So it's like a process of almost shedding. I don't know if you know this, but snakes will shed their skin once a year. And it's like this process of having the real you emerge much more than it has before, because you're shedding the negative thoughts or the doubts or the ways that you've been raised, and saying, that's not me anymore. This is who I want to be, and this is how I want to lead. So it's this just feeling of emergence and presence.
And it's like the cover of your book. On the cover of your book, you have a tree, and the leaves are like all these colorful hands. And I don't know if I'm getting the illustration correct, but I feel like it's like the tree. You're not just growing up, but you have all of the shade, and good shade, because all these leaves are starting to sprout out. And I think if people can learn that concept of it takes time to grow, you don't just get connected to a coach like yourself and overnight you just have a transformation. It's almost like you have to identify your flaws and then one by one try to eliminate them so that way you can start growing. And is it possible that before people go to coaches in general, that some way down the line they just stop growing? And that's why they're experiencing the frustrations and feeling like they're stuck.
So the metaphor of the tree is about being rooted. If you look at trees that they go through storms and they sway, but guess what? They have deep roots and they remain. So it's about being rooted, and that's rooted in your past experiences and your wisdom, and at the same time growing. And when you talk about people being stuck, there are times where we stagnate on a certain topic for a minute. We absolutely do. And we think, why is this happening? Why is this happening to me? This is not fair. And oftentimes you could be absolutely correct. We get in these situations that are challenging. They're not fair. Someone could be treating you in some way that you don't appreciate. And we could feel stuck, and we could feel like a victim. And really what we have is a choice, right? You could be right, or you can be happy and change things. And you could have your pride, or you can create a whole different environment, right? And so I always ask the person, if they're in a place that they're not quite yet ready, they're mad, they feel like a victim, I first empathize, because it's difficult when you want to create great relationships and a great environment and someone is not in that place. It's difficult, right? And I ask, how would you like things to be if we could forget the way you would do it. But if you could do it, what would you want to see happening? And most people will say, I want everyone to be productive and happy and engaged. I want to feel peace. And that's why my book is entitled by my philosophy, It Starts With You. A powerful culture starts with you. So as difficult as any situation is, we have to ask ourselves, where do I have agency? Where do I have power in this situation to make it better? And not by dictating new rules and policies, but by understanding what's going on and role modeling the behavior that I want to see in others, being compassionate to understand, and at the same time, putting boundaries and making sure everyone knows why they're there and what the purpose is. So yes, people can get stuck, people can feel stagnated, and it happens to all of us. And we sometimes stay there for a while until we decide, I'm sick of this. I want to do something different. I want things to be different. And it always starts with us.
Once again, you listen to I Am Refocused Radio, talking to our guest today, Dr. Shahrzad Nooravi. And also go to her website. She has an awesome website, strategymeetsperformance.com. And get her book. It's available on Amazon, anywhere you can get a book. A Powerful Culture Starts With You. Cultivate a thriving workplace from the inside out. Dr. Shahrzad, man, first of all, it's been, a super fast 25 minutes, but I want to say thank you for taking time, your busy schedule, talking to I Am Refocused Radio. What call to action would you have for our audience to take?
My call to action is to explore the tools that I have placed out there in the world. So the book, A Powerful Culture Starts With You, is also an audiobook because I have understood that 1 out of 3 people like to listen. So it's on Audibles and the different forms. I have a lot of different forms I created to walk through how to create a strong culture. So we have the Watch It model, where you look at your culture from a fresh set of eyes. We have Drive It that we talked about, and then Walk It. This is for your senior team and how they can make sure everyone is aligned. So all of these are in the book and on the book's website, apowerfulculture.com. So I encourage all of you to look at all of the cultures you're involved in, whether it's in your community groups, whether it's at work, or even in your family. Well, how can we be even stronger? How can we create more collective wisdom and joy together?
And the last thing I'll say is to the audience, it starts with you. Like Dr. Shahrzad has said in the show. Once again, I want to say thank you for taking time in your schedule talking to us today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.